happening? I don't know what's happening. We're losing control of the aircraft here. We lost all control of the aircraft.
These were the chilling words that marked the beginning of one of aviation's most haunting mysteries. A top-notch airplane, an experienced crew, and a sudden plunge into the unknown. This is the tragic story of Air France Flight 447. On May 31, 2009, at around 8 p.m. local time, Air France Flight 447 left the gate at Rio de Janeiro International Airport, Brazil, bound for Paris, France. The flight path crossed the Atlantic Ocean, starting in Brazil, moving over the northern Atlantic, and approaching mainland Europe before reaching Paris. For Air France, this 12-hour route was a familiar one. The aircraft was an Airbus A330-200, the latest model in Air France's fleet, and had just been overhauled in April 2009. Two powerful General Electric CF6 engines powered this plane, which carried 216 passengers of 30 different nationalities, mostly French, Brazilian, and German. On board were business travelers and holiday-goers alike. Because the route from Rio to Paris exceeded 10 hours, 3 pilots were on duty to allow for rotation and rest periods. Leading the crew was Captain Marc Dubois, a highly experienced pilot with over 11,000 flying hours. He was joined by First Officer David Robert, a 37-year-old with 6,000 flight hours, and First Officer Pierre Cédric Bonin, aged 32, with nearly 3,000 hours. Everything seemed routine, with a seasoned team at the helm. After takeoff, the flight climbed to a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Captain Dubois remained in the cockpit with First Officer Robert, while the relief officer rested. Everything was calm, and the initial hours went smoothly as expected. Around 1:35 a.m., Flight 447 entered oceanic airspace over the Atlantic. This area, known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone, often has intense thunderstorms, making it challenging for pilots, especially at night when storms can be hard to see on radar. Although the plane's automated systems controlled the flight, the crew closely watched the weather, adjusting course and altitude to avoid the worst of the turbulence. As the plane moved through the storm, the crew discussed climbing from 35,000 to 37,000 feet. However, the thin, warm air at high altitude didn't support a safe climb, so they chose to stay at 35,000 feet. Soon after, the relief officer returned, and Captain Dubois went for his scheduled rest, leaving First Officer Robert and Bonin in control. At around 2 a.m., with the autopilot still on, the aircraft encountered moderate turbulence. The crew informed the cabin crew of the turbulence and adjusted their course. As they passed through the storm, ice crystals began to clog the plane's pitot tubes, small but essential sensors that measure airspeed. All 3 pitot tubes became blocked by ice, and the airspeed readings quickly dropped, falling from 275 to 139 knots in seconds. This triggered a series of events. The autopilot turned off, and the flight control system switched from normal mode to alternate, meaning certain built-in protections were lost. The plane became more sensitive to pilot input. Taking manual control, First Officer Bonin pulled back on the controls, causing the aircraft to climb steeply. In normal circumstances, pilots know that climbing too fast can lead to a stall, where the wings lose lift. But with confusion in the cockpit and no clear airspeed readings, the crew wasn't fully aware of the aircraft's dangerous position. After the ice melted, accurate airspeed readings returned, showing the aircraft was moving dangerously slowly for its altitude. But Bonin continued to pull back on the controls, putting the plane in a stall. The aircraft's pitch continued to increase as it struggled to maintain altitude, reaching nearly 38,000 feet before entering a rapid descent. The plane began to descend at a rate of up to 10,000 feet per minute. When Captain Dubois returned, he saw the plane in a critical state. Speed readings fluctuated, the stall warning stopped and started, and the cockpit was filled with confusing and conflicting signals. Despite the crew's efforts to stabilize the plane, it continued to fall. In the midst of chaos, they made various adjustments, including activating and then retracting the speed brakes. But without clear airspeed or altitude information, the aircraft continued its descent. As the plane descended to 4,000 feet, a ground proximity warning sounded. Both pilots pulled back on the controls in a last attempt to bring the nose up, but it was too late. The aircraft crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, tragically ending the lives of all 228 passengers and crew members on board. Investigation and findings. 2 days later, search teams found floating debris and personal items from Flight 447. Nearly 2 years later, they located the main wreckage 4,000 meters deep in the ocean. On May 10, 2011, both black boxes were recovered and sent to BEA, France's air safety agency, for analysis. The investigation showed that the temporary loss of airspeed data was likely caused by
the pitot tubes freeze here.
This triggered the autopilot to disengage, after which the crew was unable to recover from a stall that developed. Investigators found gaps in the pilot's training, particularly in high-altitude stall recovery and manual aircraft handling. BEA recommended new training protocols for high-altitude stalls, improved check and training programs, and additional safety features on commercial planes. The tragedy of Flight 447 demonstrated the serious impact of technical malfunctions and training gaps. Since then, aviation authorities have strengthened protocols, updated pilot training, and introduced safety features to make flights safer. Flight 447's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of continuous training and learning in aviation. This incident highlights the need for vigilance, preparedness, and constant improvements in safety. Do you know what were last words of captains from Japan Airlines Flight 123? Click here and I'll see you in a minute.